much for joining me today. We are talking through a series of transformational leadership and looking at leadership through a very different lens. Talking with innovators and disruptors, including some incredible women that I have admired over time. Today, we're talking with Sharon Christopher, and I'm going to ask her to start by introducing herself and the role that she currently has, as well as some of the roles that she's held. And then we'll move straight into the discussion about transformational leadership.
Oh, well, thank you, Racquel, and to all your listeners. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always willing to help others by repeating the story of my own journey. And who is Sharon Christopher in terms of professionally? Right now, I'm an attorney at law, a leadership development coach, and a motivational speaker. But my life has been spent, my working life, the bulk of it has really been spent in the corporate arena. I entered into executive management when I was in my late 20s. And I went on, I ended my career as Deputy CEO of the First Citizens Group of Companies, which is the largest indigenous banking group in the English-speaking Caribbean. And that sort of in a nutshell is who I am. I mean, outside of the corporate, I'm a mother, a very proud mother, a fantastic 29-year-old who just is moving in leaps and bounds and make me so happy that I went through that journey.
Wonderful. No, it's definitely rewarding when it isn't thankless.
But it's never thankless. Raising children is never thankless.
Well, I heard somebody say one time that being a mother is like being the activities director, the unpaid activities director on the SSS Ungrateful. So sometimes.
I mean, sometimes you might feel so, but that's more out of your feeling than the reality of what is happening. Because, your children are like your animals. They always love you.
That's true. And I think it's important to raise children with gratitude, but part, and we'll get back to...
Hard. I'm not telling you it's easy, and I don't know our conversation, but it's hard, and it's hard to be a woman moving upwards in the corporate world and looking after, raising children at the same time. Nobody can pretend that it's a joke. It is very difficult.
Incredibly so, but incredibly rewarding, as we started out by saying. And yeah, absolutely. I'm incredibly proud of my two girls as well. All right, so I wanted to start off the discussion talking about transformational leadership and what that means to you, and some of the transformations that you have been a part of and that you've led, but also what it means from your vantage point to be a transformational leader.
The whole concept of transformational leadership, which has come like a buzzword, is the new sexy term when governance went into the background. But if you really think about it, any leader, to be successful, you have to have the ability to transform. And what do I mean by that? You have to be able to bring your people along in accordance with a particular kind of direction that you consider to be the most appropriate direction. You have to be able to coach. You have to be able to motivate. You have to be able to convince. You have to be able to connect the dots. You have to be able to tell them the story. You have to push them to become what you want them to become. Now, it could be both good and bad, and I don't want to call names, but we have seen some transformational leaders that have really transformed huge societies into the darkness. And we have seen transformational leaders that brought hope. And so that the whole question of leadership and transformation, yes, goes together, but the type of transformation is what becomes, could be very problematic.
Yeah. So how did you first realize that you wanted to lead an organization or get into the realm of leadership? At what point did that happen for you?
I don't think I decided when I wanted to lead an organization. What happened to me is, I think, well, in the first place, I was the second in a family of 4. But my first sister was born premature at 3 pounds in Grenada, where there wasn't even an incubator. So you could well imagine she was always in her first year of life between life and death, which created in my parents a sort of protection in relation to her. I was born 13 months later at 9 pounds. so that I was, but I think we're also born with a certain, so that happened. So there was this sort of the protection of her all the time. And I became almost like the head of the leader among
Yes.
among the siblings. But I also think my psychological profile is one in which I like to exercise influence. I like to bring people along. I like to do that. So when I look back on my life, I think I was born into that. And when I, went into law and when I first started working, there was always part of me that wanted to be in a position of influence. Sometimes people think, I have some of my mentees and they say, I want to be a manager. And I say, well, what does that mean? I didn't want a title, but I wanted to be in that space where I could influence things and I could influence how things happen and I could get people. And I mean, law did that. I mean, standing in a court of appeal and arguing your case, there's no greater feeling than convincing a group of judges to accept what you're saying, So
yeah,
that was that was it. But the other part of it, when I fully understood that the responsibility now of leadership, interestingly enough, was in the 1990 coup. Our head office at that time was just the block across from just one block up from the Red House, so that we were in the office 6 o'clock in the evening, and we suddenly heard these sounds, and we couldn't understand what they were. They were in fact gunshots, and then there was this massive explosion, and the building we were in shook. And when that happened, we sort of ran. We were on the second floor, and we ran to the lobby area, which was on the second floor. We looked out, and we saw all these white panel vans pulling up outside the Red House, and these Arab men dressed with feathers on their head and machine guns in their hands, literally just steaming out of these things, shooting. And you see people dropping on the streets, and it's the first time I understood the expression "frozen with fear," because we were frozen with fear. So we stood still and until a bullet entered the building, and then suddenly everybody. But what happened was, so that was 6 o'clock, and there were a number of people still in the building, some 12, 14 people still in the building. And so Larry Hawaii, who was to become the CEO of the First Citizens Group you mentioned, and myself, it suddenly dawned on both of us that we were responsible. We were responsible for these 14 people. And the 14 people looked to us. It's not that everybody was saying, oh, what are we going to do now? They were like, what do we do next? And I sort of, for me, I was, Larry was calling out to the other branches and telling people to get out of Port of Spain and so on. And I was sitting there with people, talking to them about how do we, manage through this. Let us go through the bill and collect as much water as possible. With every container you could find, there was a kitchen there and so on. Collect water, write down everybody's name and their contact numbers and their next of kin, because we don't know if we are going to be killed in there. And at least people must be able to know who was in there and so on. And as it got dark and there was all this machine gun fire all over, and then security guards, the army was coming down. It was just terrible. I mean, people who did not experience 1990 don't understand what that was like in the middle and screaming and all of that.
Yeah.
But
very good.
People looked to us and said, what next? What do we do? And, I remember having to give instructions about trying to get out of the building and then pulling back those instructions and then trying to and it was just like that. And then I understood for the first time that leadership is a burden, because you have responsibility for others. I couldn't sit down there and say, oh, I'm so scared. Let me just sit down and cry and say my prayers. No, you had to, and at one stage we put everybody in one room because burning was going on in Port of Spain, and we didn't know how close to our building the burning was. So we collected all the fire extinguishers. I sent them out to get all the fire extinguishers, put it in this room. And they literally took cushions and so on and lay on the floor. And Ari and I sat there throughout the entire night. And then somebody called us. The army had the Guardian building, and they called the US, I can't remember, and called us to say that, the fire wasn't near to us and this and that. But all of these people of all different ages, many of them older, and they all look to you. And that, to me, has always been my understanding of what leadership is about.
Wow. So do you think that's, I'm trying to understand, because you mentioned that women sometimes come to you, your mentees, and say, I want to be a manager. And, we seem to over the time that we're having this gender disparity, we have women who are becoming more educated, who are entering the workforce in record numbers, and then suddenly we're getting stuck at middle management. Do you think that that's why that's happening? Because there's some fear of being responsible for others? What do you think is causing that glut in the middle?
Okay. Well, I mean, that is something that I could sit down and do a workshop with you over the next 10 weeks, okay? But the truth is, certainly from the work I do and from my talking to women throughout the entire Caribbean and what I have seen, what is happening, well, there are a couple of things happening. Women get to a certain position. And when they get, as they want to move higher, the pressure increases. And what do I call the pressure? This question of how women are viewed, the question of how women view themselves, which is even greater. So the ability to take certain kinds of positions in a boardroom or certain kinds of positions in a C-suite and so on. And then the home situation, because by that time you've started having children and stuff like that. And you have other people, including women, telling you, oh, you don't pick up your children from school. You don't do this. You don't. Mommy guilt is real. It's real.
Yes.
So getting people pushing that and so on. And the pressure just becomes so much. And the women are not, they don't have that space where they sort of get together and discuss with one another and create strategies for how do we handle this and support one another. And they just get to a stage where the woman themselves says, you see this battle, I don't need to be in it. And if you look at COVID, by December in the United States, I think they figured that month of people leaving the workforce was like 120,000, and it was all women. And that's not because women don't want to lead. And that's not because women don't want, they have to learn that leadership is not about a title. But it's about, it just becomes too hard. It becomes too hard. And they just give up and say, why must I be doing it? And they have situations at home where there's, there might be a partner in the house, whether male, female, or what. Well, female is usually more helpful, but a male in the house. And it's just that, as a woman, these are your responsibilities in the home. You cannot carry the home and carry their job 100%. You can't. And this thing I always tell women too when I talk to them. I said, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. And the only reason why men seem to have it all is because men have wives. They have people who take that home. Racquel, what managing a home involves. And if all of that is taken from you, just think how you could blossom.
Flourish, yes. No, I've often said I need a wife.
Exactly.
In addition to my husband, I need a wife.
No, it's true, and that is a truth. And I think that is one of the things that stops women. And there are a lot of issues about how women see themselves as moving forward, fears that they have about how good they are. There's a lot of stuff around that. And so there's a lot of work that women sort of need to do to prepare themselves to go through that door. Is there a glass ceiling? Of course there's a glass ceiling, but you know what? Doors have been opening. You now have to find a way to break through it and to get to the other side.
What about the school of thought that says that women need to hold their partners more accountable for the shared responsibility, both within the home as well as at work? Because there are times when women are burdened with what's called the housework. What are your views on those two things? Having women forcing others to be more accountable.
Yeah, but and that is true. Okay, so it's true. So you say to the woman, you should say that this is what you will do here, this is what. But you see, in order to get to that stage, you might know something intellectually. But if in your head there's that little voice saying, you see, you are no good. What kind of woman are you? What kind of wife are you? What kind of mother are you? You see, you no good. You know this. Because you have been conditioned and you are not even conscious of how you have been conditioned. You're not conscious. But there are all these forces that are telling you, you are not good enough. You are not good enough. You are not good enough. In that space, who are you going to say what you have to do or what you have to think or tell people what line or how to draw the line? You can't. It's not that easy. But when women become aware, the Greek philosopher Aristotle said, when you know yourself, it's the beginning of all wisdom. When we become aware of how we have been conditioned, when we have become aware of how that conditioning is affecting us, when we become aware, then we are able to at least say when the voices start, you see you, not today. I am going. When somebody comes and somebody says, I want you to take this job. I want you to chair this group that we have, or chair a committee that a company that we have, a subsidiary company in the group, and so on. That voice that starts right away, are you good enough? What you know about this? And you're able to silence it because you hear it, and you're able to actually say to it, not today. I am going. Are you afraid? Of course you're afraid, but you're going down that road. And that is the challenge that women have. How do we silence that voice? But we can't silence it unless we are aware of it and we accept that it is there.
So did you have that voice, or were you fearless?
And no, there's no fearless. Everybody has that voice. Everybody. Good. Look, I was a single parent, which made it even worse. Although sometimes I think, at least being a single parent, you knew you didn't have support. So
right. you made preparations. Exactly.
But, I remember when my daughter was in school, and the school has all these, well, you probably haven't reached there yet, and COVID, all these little cake sales and all these tea parties and things, and they send all these 100 tickets. I mean, I just used to write a check for all the tickets. There's no way I'm holding a child's hand, walking through a neighborhood to sell tickets. Where am I going to get that time? Where am I,
Exactly.
And I remember they would have these things and parents had to bring in cakes and so on. In those days, right next to me, Massey was called Hilo. And Hilo was selling cakes for $20. And I would go in and buy a Hilo cake. And the mothers would say, and I never made any pretense, it was very good, it probably tasted better than many of their cakes. But I cannot tell you the number of women who said to me, oh, you didn't make that cake yourself? Oh, you didn't think? Oh, I was up all night. And there would be part of me that would feel guilty. I would say, Lord, how am I raising this child? You know? And so it's there, but you have to start learning. It took me a while to really start. I mean, I was still moving ahead because much as I love being a mother, I am not a pretty Polly lady. I can't sit down for hours and put on bracelets and play pretty Polly and all those things. I can't. It drives me ballistic under the tent being Pocahontas and all them kind of things. I could do it in little stretches, right? So no, these are realities, and I am not ashamed to talk about it. Sometimes women say, but how could you say those things? It's the truth. And I say it to my daughter. It didn't stop me from loving her, and it will never, but you have to know who you are. And at least I was on some kind of journey around understanding who I was to some extent. But it wasn't really until I would say in my 40s that I really started to work on myself and understand who is Sharon Christopher, what is really driving her and what is it she wants. Before that, I was on a track and moving very fast, but it wasn't conscious.
Well, that's at least fortunate for you that, things just kept progressing. It's funny. I am I don't know, Polly Princess mother. I love, I love the playing of the games and everything else. But I also recognize the obligation to teach my girls how to live so that when I'm thinking about, if I go to the gym, that's time away from her. No, I want them to have a sense of taking care of themselves. I want them to have a sense of you are a whole person. I want them to have a sense of fun and fun with friends. And so that means that at times I have to leave you to go have fun with my friends because that's what I want for you. I don't want you to sit there and absorb yourself in children so much that when the children eventually go off and leave and live their full lives, that you don't have a life left because you've not had any other experience.
And I think the important thing you talk about, what do you teach your girls? The truth is, when Catherine was very small, I would say to her, who does mommy love? When I'll be playing with her, kissing up, and who does mommy love? And she said, mommy loves me. I said, who does mommy love most? And she says, mommy loves me. And I said, no, mommy loves mommy the most, then mommy loves that. Because unless you love yourself first, nobody can really love you. And I always used to have that discussion, learn to love yourself first. When you love yourself, and then people would love you. And, and so what I'm trying to say is, but there's almost a sort of...
I love that.
Kids, a sort of consciousness around that raising that you have to be involved in, because the truth is, what messages are we sending when our children are frustrated, when they are tired, when they see you like that, exhausted? Well, that is the way life is. And it's not. It's not. I mean, there are times people are tired, but you must show your kids that it's possible to have a life of joy. And that's what you want for them, to have that.
I remember I had one of the big decisions in my life. I had to decide whether or not I was going to grad school after undergrad. And my daughter was born. I was a single parent as well. And I was talking to my aunt and I said, boy, I don't know. It'll take up so much time away from her. And she's like, listen, the time will pass whether you do it or not do it, So you might as well have something to show for the time. So I said, okay. And I forged ahead and I went to grad school. So then one day someone asked my 4-year-old child at the time, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? She was like, well, anything that doesn't require school, because it means that you stay up all night and you cry. I was horrified. I didn't even know that she
was conscious of the fact that
she was conscious of the fact that I was, I felt overworked and I was exhausted all the time, and I'm up late at night, and I felt guilty.
If you didn't feel guilty, you would not have been crying.
Exactly. And so then now, on top of all of that, I had to develop a sense of joy around school so that she would experience school for me as a joy. And so it's such an obligation. But what I hope though that women recognize in the many obligations that we take on is that leadership is an obligation not just for you, but for society and for the greater good for all of us. We need to have more women willing to lead at the highest levels. And I'm not even sure how we convince them of that wholesale, that this is bigger than just you.
Well, I agree with everything you said, but I'm just going to sort of disagree.
It's okay to disagree, exactly. It's okay to disagree.
The first priority for any woman is to know how to lead herself. That's her first priority. You cannot lead people unless you know how to lead yourself. And we have seen it all. You sit down in a boardroom, you sit in a corporate office or whatever, and you see a woman in the highest position and so on, and then all of a sudden she's going off crazy and carrying on, and people say, boy, she's mad, she's sick. No, there are a lot of stuff in her life that she needs to clean, and she has not done that. There are a lot of things that she needs to do that she has not done that. There's a lot of pain that is in there that she has to touch and get rid of, and she has not done that. So you're not going to be an effective leader to start with, because you can't really lead anybody else and feel and treat people and be obligated. I mean, if you take that 1990 coup situation, if you were somebody that you have so much trauma in your life, that you had been in situations in which your life had been so threatened and you had never dealt with it, you just packed it and it went away, right? And you're sitting, suppose that's me and I'm sitting there. When the whole thing starts to happen, I would not be in a position to pull everybody along. I would just go crazy.
Fall apart. Yeah, the presence of mind to think of
I think there's a starting position, and there is almost, when I say finishing, but it never finishes because it's just continuous, but a position where you move from learning how to lead yourself to learning how to lead others, and you continue learning because it's a learning process. I mean, there's nothing that anybody knows 100%, but you cannot give. One of the things my mother always used to say for me, you could only give away what you have. And if you are giving away, if you only have that kind of bitterness and so on in you, that is all you're going to give away. And Wayne Dyer, who was a spiritual writer, he died now, and it's something he always used to say too. And he used to say, if you squeeze an orange, it doesn't matter how you squeeze it, all you're going to get is orange juice. So when you see somebody behaving a certain way, that is about what is inside of them, right? And you only get back, and you will get back what you give away. So you give out that, what Eckhart Tolle himself as a writer talks about, the pain body. Your pain body gives out all that anger and bitterness, and that comes back to you from your peers and from your subordinates and so on. And then you say, to quote Wayne Dyer again, why does my life smell so stink? You understand? So there are aspects about, even as we talk about leadership and we talk about transformation and we talk about responsibilities and we talk about parenting, we have to understand who we are and how we are bringing it to the table and why we are bringing certain things to the table in order for us to find our own joy before we could help others.
But isn't that yet another high bar that we're setting for women? Oh, women, you need to know yourself before you're able to lead others. You need to lead yourself before you're able to lead others. And the reality of the situation is, of the many, many leaders we have, male men especially, don't know themselves, aren't necessarily good leaders, but they are putting themselves forward and being thrusted into these positions, and they are leading us, again, the lack of diversity from my
Yeah,
perspective,
yeah,
astray. And
yeah.
so I appreciate that it is important for women to say, you know what, or people in general, for leaders to say, I need to be able to lead myself in order to be able to lead others. But in general, women tend to set a higher bar. So then how do we reconcile that to get the diversity at the leadership level that we want?
Yeah, but you see, what is happening, what happened, we can't move away from the reality of what it means to be a woman and what stands in the way of women in leadership. We don't have to pretend about that. It's almost like, I mean, in the 1970s, when NCB brought out a credit card that a woman could hold on her own, that was revolutionary. In the 1970s in Trinidad and Tobago,
Yeah.
you couldn't borrow money unless you had a man sign the loan. So the women of today, like in my daughter's age group and so on, their 20s and 30s, they can't even conceive of that. But
Yeah.
that's the reality of one woman. So you.
And we're not talking about 3-4 generations ago. We're talking about
Exactly.
you and I were alive when that happened.
Yeah. And so that is what is there. That is what the playing field looks like. Now, there has been movement, so you're getting nearer to the goalpost. But the reality is you are playing with an injury, okay? So you have to decide now, what am I going to do? Am I just going to say, well, I'm injured and I can't play against all these men who are so fit? Or am I going to say, what do I need to do? Well, the first thing I need to do, where exactly am I injured? And I said, okay, if it is my, ankle and whatever, then somebody's going to show me how to band that ankle so that I can get out there. So what I'm saying is that, yes, there are things against you, and there's a wall, and there's a bar, and there's everything. But when you understand who you are, then you're able to face the battle. When you understand, you're able to face the battle. So when David was going against Goliath, he could have said, oh, this thing is so big and I'm so small, I can't put on a uniform, the armor they want me to put on, it weighing me down, I don't have any weapons, everybody laughing at me and this and that and the other. But he was able to look back at himself and say, David, who are you? Who are you? And he said, I am a person who I believe in a God, that when my sheep was put in the lion's mouth, I went in the lion's mouth and took it out. So I might look a certain way. I might wear a uniform like a woman wears a uniform, but you know what? That is not going to stop me. He had to know who he was before he went forward. Because when you become who people say you are, oh, you're a woman, you're emotional, oh, you're weak, and you take that armor on, partners, then you can't fight the Goliath. And that's what it is. So that's why I say that is important. Men need to. I mean, I have male clients, and I carry them through the same exercise about understanding yourself and so on. But in many ways, they have it easier because people are more accepting of men's inability to lead. However, that is really changing in many ways. And that's why now with all the HR things like having to do 360s and all of that, that's why men are so upset, because all of a sudden you're being held not to a bottom line, but you're being held to certain behavioral competencies.
So I absolutely, I understand and I agree. And I think that, so how do we then close the gap? How do we, say, okay, you're playing with this injury. There are things that need to be fixed. You absolutely need to get support and help. You need to put a structure in place. You need to put a plan in place. But how do we get more women? How do we do that quicker than it's happening now?
Well, I think it's just not happening quickly because it's not being discussed. Okay, so work like this podcast that you are doing, this kind of thing, work like a lot more organizations. We have International Women's Day coming up, and the whole thing is about getting rid of bias and so on. And a lot of organizations bring in people like myself to talk through some of these issues. So it starts creating awareness. And the more awareness that is created is the more women are going to get together in sort of groups and start discussing things and so on. And the truth is it is evolutionary, not revolutionary. But at the same time, when you consider where women have come from to where they are today, it's significant. I mean, we are sitting down here talking about Biden say he's going to put a Black woman on the Supreme Court, and it's almost offensive, as if to say, why should that be a big thing, that a Black woman should be on the Supreme Court? But it is a big thing. It is a big thing
because it's never happened before.
These are all the things, exactly, and these are the hurdles that we need to overcome. But we must just be brave enough and resourceful enough. And we become resourceful through our meeting together in our groups, through our talking together, through our sharing. You don't have to tell somebody all your business or hug them up and take them home, but you could talk to the issues of what are the things that affect us as women. And as we do more and more of that work and people become aware, you see people started to move forward and so on. And this is what is happening. You know, in my own work, all the time, I have women ringing me and asking me to coach them. I don't think that would have happened 10 years ago. Even if I was doing this work, you know, I don't know, but I think people are becoming far more aware then. I'm a woman, I'm in this position, you know, I'm heading into the C-suite, or I'm sitting in the C-suite and something is not right. And I have clients that I've even said to them after I've done some sessions with them, and we continue with their sessions, but the damage may be so deep that I've said to them, listen, I want you to see a psychologist and discuss these issues. You know, I'm not a trained psychologist. But the point is when we recognize that we don't need to be perfect.
Yes.
We just have to love ourselves enough to know that we are good enough. And the same way, if the light's phasing in our house or the tap bursts and so on, we call professionals, then we seek professional help. But I think a lot more of that is in fact happening. There was time when things like what we are doing here, people say, well, that's just a hen thing. And I don't know if you remember that language about hen party and
of course.
And all that very offensive thing to kind of shut women down. But now more and more women are coming together and sort of saying, you know, where are we and what do we want? Who are we and what do we want and how are we going to get there and how are we going to find the help to take us there? And so that is tremendous.
Well, let me ask you one last question.
Yeah, sure,
how would you describe your leadership style?
Maybe you should ask the people that I've led. I always tell people,
well, you know what? You were on my board and I thought you were always incredibly prepared. You were forthright. You were honest.
Yeah.
You didn't mince words.
That's
you were
right.
tough, but you were fair. And you were a force to be reckoned with and somebody that I deeply admired. I was like, that is the kind of woman, that is the kind of board member, that is the kind of person that I want to become.
Well,
so certainly from my perspective.
But
every box for me.
I always say to people, I'm not nice. You know, people have this thing about sort of nice and everybody smile up at everybody and so on. I'm not nice, but I'm good. I'm a good person. I'm a good person as a person. At least, and I try to be all the time. And even when I am not good, like I've crossed a line or should not have treated somebody a certain way or said certain things, then I would call them, you know, and it doesn't matter what level they are in the organization. And even as a mother, I would go back to my daughter at 5 years old and say, listen, mommy really should not have said that yesterday. You know, she just was tired and she got so annoyed and that is wrong. And it's the same thing I do in thing. The other day I was in a big meeting with a significant regional head and you know, and I behaved a certain way in the meeting. And afterwards, some of the others in the group were saying, boy, Sharon, we didn't even recognize you, you know, you were so conciliatory and so on. And I said, you know, I realize how important it is sometimes that you just have to know where to hold and where to, you know, when to fold. And I realized that if I stood in this other person's shoes, I understood what, in a sense, what is happening to them. So I was able to sort of, you know, work things to get a certain things through. And one of the guys said to me, he said, boy, you're really proving you're never too old to learn. And I said, that is exactly true. And that is the truth. Because you see, the more you become confident in yourself, the more you're able to make yourself vulnerable because it doesn't take away from who you are. And the more you're able to say, look, I'm sorry, that approach was not correct. And you're okay with it, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
you're
yeah. You
striving
don't feel
all
like you've
the
lost
time.
any ground by doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you're striving all the time to be a better you. And that's what we all have to be striving for. And I just want to end by really saying to women, my one mantra that I say all the time, I say to myself and I say to every woman or man who's listening here, be kind to yourself. Be
Mm.
kind to yourself. Understand that your best today will not be your best tomorrow. And your best tomorrow might be worse than your best for the last 2 days. So it's okay. It's okay. You are just there trying to live your best life. And you put the resources in place and you do what you have to do. But at the end of the day, you are only doing your best. So be kind to yourself.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Absolutely fabulous. I will remember that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Sharon.
Okay, Racquel. Okay.